Systems and processes, systems and processes, systems and processes. Well, you tired of hearing that? Because I can tell you this, that's what I hear from the salespeople all the time. They're tired of hearing it. But I can also tell you that they work. You will grow your business like nobody's business if you follow the following systems and processes. I've got 4 that I'd like to share with you right now. 1, I call backward thinking. Define success and chart back to the present. One of the fancy terms we can lay on that is reverse engineering. And so, what is it that you want to create in sales this year? How much? Is it $1 million? Is it $2 million? Is it $5 million? What is that number? Now, once you've got that number, then what we want you to do is we want you to dice it down. We want to dice it up in the months. How much are you going to do in January of the million? Let's say it's $1 million in goal. Well, then what we want to do is 100,000 of the million in January. Well, I'm going to ask you to go a little bit further, and then I'm going to ask you to take that 100,000 and break it into weeks. In other words, what I'm asking is, on $1 million goal, what I'd like you to do is dice it all the way down into week by week, a year in advance, how much is going to add up to $1 million. Let's say that the first week of the year, you're going to do $30,000 of the 100,000, $30,000 of the million. And so if I can get you to break it down into that, I think we're on our way to at least doing $1 million, if not more. I do marathons. While we're doing this taping here, I can tell you in the last 3 weeks, I did 3 full marathons. 26.2 miles, 42K, whichever way you want to slice it, is a long way. And the last one I did was in Vermont just this past Sunday. It was a point-to-point marathon, which means that you start at one point and you finish 26 miles away. Well, I wanted my car to be at the finish line so that I could get to the airport. So what I did is I drove to the end, parked my car, and they had a bus that took us to the start. They should have given us blindfolds on the bus. All I could think of on the bus ride was, man, this is a long bus ride. They're going to make me run this. And so my head started getting out of the game, and I was somewhat defeated because, gosh, it's a long way. So I want to give you some insight on how this guy, Jack Daly, actually runs marathons. I can't get my head wrapped around doing 26.2 miles. So you know what I decided? Not to run it. I don't run 26.2 miles. Here's what I decided. I can run a mile. And so what I do is I get at the start line and the gun goes off and I say, run 1 mile. And when you finish that mile, they'll have a mile marker. And then you can decide if you can run 1 more. Now, every time I get to the mile marker and I ask myself honestly, could you run just 1 more? Every time I say, I could do that. Well, guess it. Get this. $1 million in sales as my overall target? That sounds like a marathon. But 30,000 in week 1 sounds like a mile. So let me give you the 4 concepts within backward thinking's system. 1, you got to put your goals in writing. Because if they're not in writing, they're dreams, and dreams don't often come true, but there's a ton of evidence that suggests that goals in writing do. So we put the million in, and then we broke it down. All right. The second key ingredient is that we have to have a written plan on how we're going to get that $1 million down. And the key word that I like using with salespeople here is activities. Activities, activities, activities. And so every business and every company should have an identifiable list of activities that a salesperson needs to be focused on and doing in order to achieve their target. So let me give you some examples. If I needed to do $30,000 in business in week 1, well, I want to know how many outbound calls am I going to need to make that week in order to write 30,000 in orders? How many inbound calls am I going to be in the office waiting to hear from people to write that 30,000? How many face-to-face appointments am I going to need that week in order to write 30,000? I want to know how many presentations it's going to take that week. I might want to know how many networking events that I'm going to be participating in that week. I might want to know if there's trade shows that I should be putting on that week in order to generate that 30,000. And I want to figure out how many and the type of personal marketing initiatives that I need to place that week in order to generate that 30,000. And in just a little bit here, I'm going to be talking about the importance of these personal marketing initiatives that I like to fondly call a touch system. And the thing that I'll tell you about it right now is it takes 9 of those touches before your prospect even knows that you exist. And so thinking all of those things through is the second key initiative in backward thinking. The third is a system of measurement. Every one of those activities, we want the salesperson to be measuring every one of those and keeping track as to whether they're doing them or not doing them. I can tell you that that's the way it works when I'm trying to learn to swim. I got to log so many meters or so many yards in the pool. If I'm running, I got to log so many running miles on a daily basis in order to achieve what I want to achieve. And it's not any different here in the sales game. So a system of measurement, things that get measured, get done. The fourth ingredient in backward thinking is a system of accountability. Somebody looking over our shoulder. And so, I'm at the health club a lot, and I watch these trainers, and I watch people, and they hire the trainer, and it's amazing to me that they learn what they need to learn in terms of what machines to use and the frequency, but they keep the trainer on. So I started interviewing people at the health club. And so I've been noticing that you've been here for a couple years. You've been working with this trainer, and don't you have it down by now? And more often than not, this is the answer they're giving me. Well, I sort of figured out a long while ago what I need to do. But I got to tell you, Jack, 3 times a week I'm here at the health center at 6 a.m., and if I didn't pay this guy $75 an hour and knew that he was waiting on me, and if I don't show, I'm paying him anyway, when the alarm went off, I probably would have hit it and just stayed in bed. And so I've never needed that type of accountability, but I can tell you a significant amount of people need to be held accountable in order to get the activities done in order to achieve their sales goals. That system and process called backward thinking, you implement just that one thing and your business will be hyper grown. So I want to move to another concept. And the system and process here is perceived value. The first time that someone buys from you, whether it's a product or a service, they don't buy real value. You see, first time in, you can't buy it. You have no idea. You make a perception. You make a leap of faith that says, I perceive buying this product or this service will render me these benefits. And until you've done it and experienced the product or the service, you have no idea whether that's going to be delivered or not. Now, if you are pleased, you can go back and do it again and again and again. But first time is based on perceived value. So I want you to think about Apple Computer and what an advantage that company has. Because, quite frankly, they don't have customers. They have a cult. and by the way, Steve Jobs designed it to be a cult. It doesn't matter what price they're charging for an Apple product, the cult pays. They show up, they stand in line, and they'll wait weeks, if not months, for the product to be available. And they'll pay 3 and 4 times what a competitor product is charging. Well, here's what I say. How hard can it be to be a salesperson in Apple when people are banging on the door and standing in line? And so this is a huge, huge item. And this is your challenge. What is your Apple? What is it about you as a salesperson? Not only do companies have perceived value, individual salespeople do. And so, what is it about you as a salesperson that would cause people to go out of their way and or pay a premium to do business with you? Now, what I just laid on you right now is a huge task. But I will tell you that formidable task, if you wrestle that thing down and you solve that, you're on to success in a similar way that Apple has taken the market by storm, creating perceived value. All right, let's go to another area. I call it proactive pipeline management. What is your system to take prospects, move them into customers, and then take those customers and move them into clients? And my definition of a customer is someone who occasionally buys from me. My definition of a client is someone who regularly and ongoing buys from me. Successful salespeople build what's called a clientele. When you build a clientele as a salesperson, you don't worry about making your house payment. You don't worry about making your car payment. You don't worry about making your lifestyle payments. And when you don't have to worry about things like that, you can sell at that high level of caring more about your customer than you do about the sell. And the key is to build a clientele, or as Steve Jobs would have called it, a cult. Let's talk about it. If I were your sales manager, what I would be asking of you at least once a month. Now, I will tell you that my high performance sales clients do what I'm about to tell you weekly. But let's lower the bar and get it digestible and just say monthly. I sit down with you and I say the following. So, Bob, who is the number one prospect that you're working on right now? That if you land at that account, life gets really good. Who is that? And we put that down on the list. And the next thing I want to know is who's number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and we work right on down the list, extremely diligently identifying the people that aren't currently doing business with us, but we wish they were. Now, once I have that list of prospects, what I want to know is, when did you last touch each one of them? How often have you touched them in the last 90 days? And in what ways are you touching them? And then the last question I need to ask you on every one of those prospects is, what is it that's standing in the way of them becoming a customer of ours? Well, that's one category. I'm going to take the same process and do it with the customer. Who's your number 1 customer? Number 2, number 3, and on down the list. When did you last touch them? How often have you touched them in the last 90 days? And then the question, what's standing in the way of them transitioning into being a client? We're going to go through it again. Who's your number 1 client? Your number 2 client? Number 3 client? On down the list. How often are you touching? What ways are you touching? And what's standing in the way of them doing even more business with us? If you can imagine doing this, and having someone holding you accountable on a monthly basis, again, I love it weekly, your business is bound to be hyper grown. And that's what this is all about. It is a system. It is a process. It is called holding you accountable. And I think we need those systems and processes as human beings in order to make it happen. Well, I talked about how often are you touching, what ways are you touching. So let's talk about that system, a touch system. Here's how we build it. There are 4 databases. I've already referred to them, but let me remind you again. Prospects, customers, clients, and then my magic other. Anybody that you haven't captured in the first 3 buckets belongs in the 4th bucket. And if you want, you can call them those centers of influence. The swim coach Steve that never bought a bike but sent 7 figures worth of business over to the bike shop owner Hank. That ought to be in a database, eh? All right. Now, once we have those databases put together, now we want to identify how can we touch them. Well, we could touch them with the obvious face-to-face, personal visit, belly to belly. That's a touch. But you know, a phone call is a touch. An email is a touch. Voicemail, snail mail, fax, social media. Any way that you reach out into the marketplace to those 4 populations and say, hey, I'm out here. Again, it takes 9 touches before they know you exist. And the majority of people are quitting at 5 or less. When I talk about this, immediately in my mind, I've got this great fear. And the fear is that people are actually going to take action. Now, why would that be a fear of mine? Because I haven't really told them how to touch them in terms of what you touch them with. You see, so far, what you're probably thinking is of all the different ways that you're going to touch them with things that are about your company. The company's product list, the company's pricing, the company's new product, the company's specs on a product, the history of the company, and all of this stuff about the company. Maybe you might even touch them with things about you, your background, and some of your better clients and relationships that you've got, and all of that type of thing. You know what? If that's all you're going to do is touch your prospects, customers, and clients with things about the company and things about you, you know what? I think you just close up your tent because you ain't going to be successful. You see, now you're selling. All you're doing is acting. You know, customers don't want to hear it. They've never wanted to hear it. If they want to get act, they can go on the World Wide Web and just go to your website and get attacked. All right? So here's what we want to do. You want to touch them in a variety of other things. For example, industry info and ideas. Not your industry. No, their industry. You know, one of my companies was a residential mortgage lending business. We did home loans. And so one of our centers of influence that we would call on would be a real estate agent. Now think about that. The real estate agent is always in the market, and they could send me their home buyers that I could do the financing on. So again, that's like the swim coach, Steve, sending the bike shop customers to buy bikes. And so I want to engender those relationships very, very strongly with the top realtors. Well, I ought to then send that realtor ways that they could be better and more effective at listing homes, and at selling homes, and at showing homes. You see, I want to sign up and be a subscriber to the real estate industry magazines and newspapers and learn the things that the realtors ought to be learning and reading about. I ought to go to their trade shows and visit every booth and see if there are money-making ideas that I could take to my prospect, customer, and client realtors. I ought to go and speak at the industry events. I ought to serve in some capacity as some type of a value-add contributor to their industry. I ought to read the books that are written by the top real estate agents. What I'm literally saying is in your industry of your target markets, study their business as thoroughly as you can, and each time that you're touching them, bring them something that could help them in their business, to help them with their needs, their opportunities, and their problems to be more successful. I can tell you that your competitors are not doing this, and you will differentiate yourself from the pack. Now, another idea is that you could touch them with things that are generic business, things that can help them in their business. You could be reading magazines, whether it's a small company that you're going after or a large company. You just pick the magazines. Large, I'm going to go to The Economist and Fortune. Small, I'm probably going to go to Inc. and Fast Company. And what I'm doing is I'm subscribing to these magazines, I'm looking for articles, and I just basically run it through my scanner on my computer or run it through the copier and just make a note. Saw this article, thought of you, hope it helps you in your business, and I attach a business card and send it out. And I don't make this mistake. I don't attach a new product release and say, oh, and included in here is my new product. Let it stand pure. Let it stand pure. Self-serving comment, but Hyper Sales Growth as a book, gosh, I have clients now ordering them by the hundreds and asking me to personally autograph them and send them to them so that their salespeople can then take them out to their prospects and customers and say, here's a great book that will help you generate more business. Go and read this book. General business info. Now, another way to touch people is things that you've learned about them personally. Along this journey, we've discovered that Jack's been married 45 years and counting, that he's got a couple kids, that he likes to golf, that he likes to run, that he likes triathlons, that there's so many things that I enjoy in life. But the question that I ask you is this: if I were your prospect, customer, client, or center of influence, and I were in your database, would you have identified all those things in your database about me? Because if you do, you have something you can leverage into incredible success. For people to send me an article and say, hey, would you like to shave 2 strokes off of each round that you play in golf? Here, read this book, and include the book. Or, hey, we're going to the U.S. Open, and it's being played in our community, and I've got great tickets on Saturday and Sunday. Would you and your wife like to join us? Which just literally happened this week, and Bonnie and I will be going to the U.S. Open. If you don't think that we're building a closer relationship with that, I think that you must be from another planet. And so take that personal information that you learn about your prospects, customers, clients, and other, and pack it into that contact management system. Another thing that you can touch people with are things that are just fun, that put a smile on people's face and enjoy themselves for just a moment, because so much of out there is our problems and the issues that we're dealing with. And so to get something that's just plain fun, I take a massive amount of photos and I'm always turning them into cards and sending them people with them on the card, with me on the card. It's all personalized. There are several apps on the marketplace that you can use. My favorite at the moment, because we're always changing, but at the moment, Send Out Cards. They've got just some incredible features within there that I've taken advantage of, including taking the time to write out in capital letters and small case and numbers from 0 to 9, everything that I could ever use in communicating in my own handwriting. And now, right off of my phone, I'm taking the photo and producing the card, and it's being delivered to my prospect in my handwriting. Plain, simple fun. 10 years ago, I sent a card to a key center of influence in Australia. Never had been to Australia. The card cost me less than $4 and eventually led to me being invited to Australia with my wife for a month, all expenses paid, and the card since then has brought us to Australia every year since that for 10 years, and revenue generation has been 7 figures. Well, if you don't call that fun, then I don't know. You need to give me a call someday and tell me what fun is to you, because I'm having a blast. Last piece of the touch system, frequency of touch. Well, we don't have the time, we don't have the budget, and all customers don't deserve to be touched equally. So this is what I'm going to suggest. Figure out the value potential of each one of those brackets. Prospect, customer, clients, and other. And then maybe some of them you touch every day in some way with something of value. Maybe some only want to touch weekly. Others, maybe you touch them on a monthly basis, a quarterly basis, and maybe a special event. And so put that into an organized system and process. Take that, combine it with pipeline management, combine it with perception of value, and then be focused on backward thinking and the high payoff activities. What competition? We have not just ate their lunch, they are starving and dying. It's all about systems and processes to hyper sales growth.